everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and it's been over a year now since the HE changes, something that 70% of the player base apparently wanted went into the game. And it's over 2 years now since one professional idiot decided to load HE only in their Object 277. Now my question is, does it still work even with the changes? Let's find out. So it all started as a bit of a dare 2 years ago from Twitch chat saying, why don't you try and play the Object 277 with HE only? It's the best way to play the tank. And so I foolishly tried to prove them all wrong by loading into a game, was really happy to see Malinovka, thinking that the game was going to be an absolute disaster. Unfortunately, it actually ended up going very well, and I ended up getting an ace tanker for the vehicle, and I probably spawned a whole load of idiots that thought that is the best way to be able to play World of Tanks. Spoilers, it wasn't then, before the HE changes, and spoilers, it definitely isn't now. Nevertheless, it's a little bit of a throwback for fun. Last month, which we can say now that it's the 1st of May, even if it was only just a couple of weeks ago, I decided to go and take the 277 out for a bit of an anniversary spin, loading high explosive rounds in the tank for the first time in a couple of years to see if they were still competitive, even with the huge nerfs that high explosive rounds received a year ago. And don't you just love the meta now? No artillery, loads of meta hold down heavy tanks, just driving wherever they want. Vehicles like the Chieftain, preloading gold at the start of the game to be able to give you a little bit of a headache, and now the best thing that you can do to them is 58 damage and 77 damage through the front of the turret. This is what everybody wanted. This is why 70% of the player base, or at least according to Wargaming, thought that the changes would be positive. Now, I would strongly contest that still to this day. I feel that the meta that we have in World of Tanks now is just a little less thoughtful, it's a little bit faster, and it just feels as if everyone's just playing heavy tanks and sitting them out in the open because they don't have to worry about artillery. However, they still have to worry about all the tank destroyers that I've got behind them, or behind me, and they have to worry about the ones that they've got above them. By rushing over the bridge here, I make all of these players who want to sit down in the more safer positions useful. And so by getting forwards here, hopefully my opponents are going to try and poke around without fear for artillery, because there aren't any in this game. And but hopefully then they're going to end up getting shot by the tank destroyers, as we see the Foch 155 getting shot down there. So I'm trying to wedge my tank up to deal with the Rinoceronte, and we do 102 damage to the AMX-50B's turret, but luckily our team do 300 assistance. So we literally only have high explosive rounds loaded in this tank, and I have to admit, all the way through this replay, I'm just thinking about how much more damage I would have done if I was firing armor-piercing rounds. The disparity between the kind of damage that we're doing in this video and the video in the 277 a couple of years ago is absolutely outrageous. I went and watched that video back, and I was doing a couple of hundred damage a shot. Now we're doing, like, at best, like 90, 100 a shot. Unless, of course, you do hit the real weak plates on the tanks. It's not enough now to basically try and splash your shells over the frontal weak points of your vehicle. It's very important about where the shell hits. And so we can see that if we aim at the roof deck there of the IS-7 down below us, our shell actually ends up doing 353. So we can kind of just clunk the front of a Chieftain, and we're doing sometimes 50, sometimes 100. But if I shoot the top of his tank like that, 142, still not anything really to write home about. And I guess I'm just lucky that this Chieftain just seems to be able to sit in front of me. I mean, I guess that's what they've just got so used to doing, right? They don't have to really worry about high explosive rounds. They don't really have to worry about artillery. They get just to sit in front of you and just do this. And so kind of like bringing HE back in this game against this Chieftain, literally the epitome of, shall we say, disparity in World of Tanks. Somebody who's gone and participated in Clan Wars, and now they want to take their Clan Wars tank out against vehicles that aren't nearly quite as good, at least in a hold-down situation. However, hold up! What was this? 617 damage dealt to the Stridsvagn 103B there, as I believe I managed to go through the weak point on top of the tank. And oh dear, look what's happening at the top of the screen. Does anyone think that the Chieftain has run out of gold and now they're having to fire regular rounds? Regular APCR rounds? What is this? And at this stage of the game, I was starting to feel fairly confident and laughing my backside off out of the prospect that there's a 277, literally a very, very strong hull-down vehicle with a great turret, just doesn't have the gun depression of the Chieftain, just sitting in front of all these vehicles and just giving them an absolute hard time. But oh dear, it looks like he was just feeling conservative for a couple of shells, maybe worried that his gold was eventually going to run out, but no, it's back and the gold rounds are now going to start to enter the front of my vehicle once again. But 2,700 damage here is just an absolute joke, considering that we have fired so many shells and so many direct hits, but at least we don't even have to penetrate the enemy tanks to still be able to deal with them. Now, I'd like to clarify, this is a very exceptional situation that I've managed to get myself in the 277 here. Well, there we go, that's more like it. 28 damage to the front of the Chieftain, where I'm sitting in a position where I'm using my perfect amount of turret armor with the 5.5 degrees of gun depression this tank has, and more importantly, I've got opponents that are willing to just sit in front of me and they're not pushing me. Maybe they think that I'm just memeing with my HE rounds. Can you imagine what's going through the Chieftain's head on the enemy team right now? How many more HE rounds can he have? Can you imagine if he just pushed me? If he'd pushed me, I wouldn't have been able to do more than 500 damage to him, but slowly but surely we were chipping them down. So I decided to push forwards here because the last thing that I want is to leave the Leopard on my team alone in this 2 versus 1 fight. But he just manages to shut down the Chieftain. I'm hoping that maybe I can get a shot back into the weak point of the STR V103B. It's always so weird to see that it's the glass cannon tanks and the ones with not the best win ratio that suffered the most with the HE changes, and yet it's the ones that didn't need the buff that benefited the most. No one wanted a Chieftain to be buffed. Nobody wanted a Kranvang to be buffed. Nobody would have probably thought about the VZ55 going into the game, but would it have needed a buff? Or more importantly, would it have been in a worse position if people could have still done reasonable amounts of damage to it with their HE rounds? Definitely. It's one of the things that kept tanks with that god tier turret armor in check. And bizarre that this one, the 277, the one with also the god tier turret armor, is now becoming the one to push aside the other vehicles like the Chieftain with the HE. You really couldn't script it. 3,600 damage dealt here, but I've hit what? Probably about 22 shells so far this game to be able to achieve that damage. It's not costing me an arm and a leg like it would be if I was firing gold, but it still definitely hasn't been the most economical game so far in World of Tanks history. And there's just so many situations where if I was firing an armor-piercing round, it would be game-changing. 75 damage isn't really going to ever work out well for you in these kind of trades. If I dealt 500 damage to him, if I dealt 500 damage to the STR V103B, they wouldn't have been able to run away. So while we're very fortunate in this situation, as we ask for the Kranvang to possibly come and help us out, maybe he wants to use some of his hit points on his full health tank, and I ask the Leopard to stay safe while we hopefully have the Kranvang to come round. Back to what I was saying. Don't try to think that HE only is the correct way to play, because you can't even deal with screens like that. If I was dealing with a Super Conqueror right now, I'd be doing practically nothing to that vehicle. You still need to take regular rounds. You still need to take your high explosive anti-tank or your APCR rounds. They are irreplaceable. And wow, look, the SDB-1 manages to fire HE at me. How dare he? I meant to be the only HE warrior around here. Not only managing to do 34 damage to my vehicle, but also managing to knock out one of my crew members that we quickly put back into effect. So I'm a little bit worried about this SDB-1 now, but luckily for me, the Kranvang manages to put a shell in, and now I'm feeling a little bit more chipper about the fact that I might be able to kill this SDB-1 with the only 7 remaining shells in my tank. It's not very often in a vehicle like this you would ever start to consider that you're running out of enough rounds to be able to carry the game, but that's exactly what I was worried about here. And so I stopped firing nearly so much because I was running out of ammunition. Now, what would have happened if I'd played against a mouse, for example? I would have never have had enough ammunition in the tank to even probably take away half of their hit points, let alone to remove the mouse or multiple mouse from a game. So the armor-piercing rounds here, just taking at least half of them would have been so much nicer. But that's not what the challenge is about. The challenge isn't about taking some high explosive rounds and just grinding them through in this situation. It's about trying to only take HE. So I'm trying to do my best to encourage the Kranvang here to just cross. I say, it's safe, come bro. Because we've only got 5 minutes and 20 seconds left in this game, and we are seriously outnumbering our opponents with regards to not only our tanks, well, only one, I guess, but more importantly, our hit points. When you see that you've got 7,000 hit points against 2,700, you really should be trying to press your advantage. Unfortunately for me, even though the Leopard and myself are a one-shot, the mighty Kranvang has decided to cross the bridge. And don't worry, we'll support you, Mr. Kranvang. You got this. You just go and handle the IS-7 as he manages to absorb a shell. The IS-7 unfortunately doesn't take a return fire from the Kranvang. The Leopard also misses a shell. I'm going to come around the corner trying to look for a shell onto this IS-7 here. I don't really want to get caught out, and I'm just going to wait for the Kranvang to absorb the shot. And there we go. The perfect support, the 277. And I say thank you to the Kranvang for actually coming and making a push play through there. But oh dear, one Kranvang shoots me, and luckily for me, my final 124 hit points in this battle lets my team know that the Kranvang has relocated into that position. So in this kind of a situation, it's a little bit tricky. I think the Leopard is actually making the correct play now by flanking around. I think that maybe I was a little bit ignorant pushing through that situation, and maybe I'd had just a little bit too much fun. Did I expect to do 6,000 combined in the 277 with high explosive rounds only? Totally not. I did not expect that. But still, I should have been safer as I went round that corner. I thought that we were 3 tanks pushing into a situation with a healthy Kranvang, but in the end, it just didn't go too well for us. So right now I was starting to get a little bit nervous as the Leopard gets spotted on the enemy team, and we see that the Leopard has 205 hit points, and I'm wondering why this WZ1321 hasn't done anything. Luckily the Leopard on my team, who is called, I'm not sure if this is their anonymized name, Kosiara, is having a fantastic round here with cleaning up a lot of valuable tanks. So the Kranvang on the enemy team decides to just drive out in front of our Kranvang. Looks like he loses a little bit of hit points. And I know exactly what that Kranvang is thinking on the enemy team. They are thinking about making their way up towards the hill location that we can see up here, because that is a fantastic opportunity to make a great defense. So the FV215B183 on our team is now pushing round with his 1,600 hit points. The Leopard, who's a one-shot, is driving past the WZ1321, who is unfortunately AFK with 1,500 hit points, which actually means that we don't have that many more than the enemy team that we can afford to squander. And when you're playing against a Kranvang and an STRV-103B, it is very easy to lose your hit points very quickly. So fortunately for us, the STRV-103B seems to be getting caught out here. I guess a little bit confused as to why the enemy Kranvang would decide to drive up onto the hill. But you know what? I think it's a strong play. To have the Kranvang up on the hill, which you can see that I also ping out and let my team know that they got 3 minutes to win it. And I tell my team that he's going to be camping up on the hill because that's exactly what he's going to do. I try to get the team together. I say, attack him together, friends. Good luck. Leopard, wait for Kranvang. I am being so much of an armchair general here. But I guess it's because I knew that the memes were there with the HE only. And obviously I'm a lot better at giving instructions. Unfortunately, this FV215B183 tanks an entire magazine from the Kranvang, and now the hit points are pretty much dead even when you include the fact that the WZ1321 is AFK. I'm obviously a lot better at giving instructions than I am at taking a rational amount of armor piercing and high explosive anti-tank rounds in my vehicle, which would undoubtedly have probably been able to win the game here if I wasn't playing like an absolute loon. But remember, I'm a professional idiot. I'm a professional idiot, boys and girls. So do not do as I do. Let me be the idiot and take the sensible option. Take a few armor piercing rounds and heat rounds in your tank. Talk about sensible. What our Kranvang does here is just unforgivable. And you can see I'm getting a little bit irritated by it. He's letting the enemy Kranvang, to all intents and purposes, reload here, even though he's got enough hit points to guarantee take a shot. All he had to do was to continue to hold down his W key against the auto-loading Swedish heavy tank. And now he's letting the Kranvang reload when he could have just driven up, and then his whole team would have been able to push up, and this was starting to look like an absolute disaster. It's like a train wreck, but you can't take your eyes away from it. I hope it's going to make interesting viewing for you. Unfortunately, our Kranvang, for the enemy Kranvang, manages to put in a 500-round shell and then finds his lower plate as well. And I couldn't believe it that the Kranvang actually managed to get through this situation, obviously with the enemy feeling the pressure to be able to try and take down this game. Chokes out, exposes his lower plate, or maybe our Kranvang just hit clutch shots onto the top of his vehicle, and our glorious Leopard, Kosiara 100, pushes round the corner to take down this one. Phew! I think one of the reasons why I was probably so insistent in the chat is because I realized if my team lost, it was down to me. It was down to me being an idiot. It was down to me firing 29 rounds of high explosive, of which 28 hit and only 1 penetrated. Irrelevant to the fact that I dealt 3,800 damage this game, that means that we were dealing on average about 130 with each of our shells. Yes, not quite the 490 alpha damage this tank has. And while you can proceed to harass the broken tanks on the enemy team, even having about 5 minutes of continuous fire against the Chieftain, we're only able to do 1,312 damage to them. That's barely 2.5 shots of penetrating armor piercing, of which I could have definitely been able to outtrade that tank as long as I traded 1 for 1 and I was not allowing them to fire multiple shells in against me. And unfortunately, while I was quite chuffed to finish second on experience here with our 6,000 combined, wasn't enough for an ace tanker this time, boys and girls, unlike 2 years ago on Malinovka. Nevertheless, we were a great support vehicle, getting a Confederate medal as well as also securing a kill, as we dealt damage to at least 6 vehicles on the enemy team that was subsequently killed by our allies. And I must give a mention to the fact that this is not even the most economical way to play. 28,000 credits spent to deal a similar amount of damage that 10,000 credits of penetrating armor-piercing rounds would have been able to achieve. So all in all, HE only in 2022. Can it work? I mean, for me, this was just an exceptional situation. And while I still recommend to take a good old glut of high explosive rounds in your vehicle, at least if you've got the ammo capacity to be able to do so, because they can be useful in certain situations, no, they've been nerfed so much that they were never the right decision, and they certainly aren't the right decision to only fire now, even in your slightly larger caliber guns like you have on the Object 277. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this silly video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you're watching this video as it's released on Sunday, I am returning to streaming today after a 4-day break, and it's time for the Tech Tree Showcase. And later on today, I'm going to be featuring all of the French auto-loading light tanks, leading up to the AMX 13105, which is the most dangerous light tank in the game, and I finally got all the field mods on it, so I've got no excuses. It's time to show it off in its final form. So come along today if you're watching this video as it's released, and I'll let you know everything there is to know about the French auto-loading light tanks. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing you all live right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby, and as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.